How exactly does a bullied outsider conquer an entire continent, only to lose it all in the blink of an eye? Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack the truly monumental life of Napoleon Bonaparte. His is a story that perfectly captures the devastating heights of human ambition. It is your classic Icarus arc, flying brilliantly close to the sun, only to come crashing violently back down. So over the next few minutes, we're going to chart that unbelievable trajectory together.
All right, let's just dive right into the massive contradiction at the very heart of his legacy. Was Napoleon a modernizing visionary who ended feudalism and brought legal equality to Europe? Or was he a devastating, autocratic dictator who left the continent in absolute ruins? Well, as we'll see through the historical evidence, the answer is a complex, deeply intertwined mix of both. Section 1. The Corsican Outsider. To really grasp his insatiable ambition, we actually have to start far, far away from the gilded halls of French aristocratic power. Born in 1769 in Ajaccio, Corsica, shortly after France acquired the island, he was essentially a total outsider. When he attended the military academy in mainland France, he was relentlessly bullied. His peers mocked his thick Corsican accent, they looked down on his minor nobility background, and basically treated him like a provincial outcast. But instead of breaking, he just buried himself in his studies. He isolated himself to excel remarkably in mathematics, history, and geography. It's a deeply humanizing detail, right? And it makes his subsequent, almost ruthless drive so astounding. And things escalated quickly. Driven by the immense strain of his father's sudden death in 1785, the teenage Napoleon suddenly found himself burdened with a lack of family finances and the intense pressure to provide. So he pushed himself even harder. Attending the highly prestigious École Militaire in Paris, he became the very first Corsican to ever graduate from it. He actually achieves a commissioned rank as an artillery second lieutenant at just 16 years old. The foundation was definitely set, but he still needed a spark.
Section 2. Seizing the Republic. Now, the absolute chaos, the power vacuums, and the sheer unpredictability of the French Revolution, that provided the exact high-stakes environment Napoleon needed to accelerate his ascent. In 1793, utilizing incredibly innovative artillery tactics, his plan helped recapture the port at the Siege of Toulon, which rocketed him to brigadier general at just 24 years old. 2 years later, he uses that exact same artillery brilliance to crush a royalist uprising in Paris, and by 1799, after a brilliant but complicated campaign in Italy, he outright orchestrates the Brumaire coup. Think about that pacing. In a mere 6 years, he transforms from a 24-year-old brigadier general to the first consul, holding the dominant power in all of France. And his Egyptian campaign perfectly illustrates the staggering duality of his rise. You see, his campaigns weren't just your standard military maneuvers. Yes, he achieved a striking military victory at the Battle of the Pyramids, but it was coupled with a devastating naval defeat at the Nile by the British Admiral Horatio Nelson, which completely stranded his forces. Yet at the exact same time, this was a massive scientific expedition that yielded world-changing cultural treasures, like the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. It's really a perfect microcosm of his entire career. Military brilliance, crippling setbacks, profound historical impact, and, because he opportunistically abandoned his army there to rush back to a politically unstable France, a very healthy dose of self-serving pragmatism.
Section 3. Crown and Code. So by 1804, the Republic was effectively dead, and Napoleon's focus shifted from seizing power to cementing it for eternity. He literally takes the crown from the Pope to crown himself emperor. But the crucial point here is that beyond the battlefield, his domestic legacy is what truly transformed the modern state. He sponsored the Napoleonic Code. Now, this wasn't just some list of rules, it was a foundational civil law system. It established equality before the law, it fiercely protected property rights, enforced secularism, and completely abolished the restrictive remnants of the old feudal system. This code was so incredibly effective and revolutionary that it still heavily influences global legal systems today, across Europe, Latin America, and beyond. This is exactly why understanding his administrative mind matters just as much as his military one. But look, as we navigate this explainer, it's absolutely crucial we weigh his legacy impartially. On the one hand, he championed deeply progressive reforms. He forcefully abolished feudalism wherever his armies went. He emancipated marginalized groups like Jews in certain regions, and he officially ended the Spanish Inquisition. Conversely, his regressive actions were brutal. He functioned as a strict autocrat. He severely restricted press freedom to control his own narrative, aggressively looted irreplaceable art from conquered territories, and violently reimposed slavery in the French colonies. It is a stark, undeniable contrast of liberation and profound oppression.
Section 4. Mastering Europe. With France completely centralized, modernized, and firmly under his total control, Napoleon's focus aggressively turns outward. He begins reshaping the borders of Europe through sheer military force and unprecedented speed. Over 60 battles. Just to put that into perspective for a second, most successful generals in history are remembered for a handful of major engagements. Napoleon fought over 60. He utilized an incredibly innovative corps system, basically breaking his massive armies into smaller, fast-moving, self-sufficient units, and used rapid marches to completely overwhelm his enemies before they could even organize a proper defense. This period right here was the absolute peak of his military dominance. His Grande Armée shattered multiple European coalitions in rapid succession. Ulm and Austerlitz in 1805 famously broke the Third Coalition. Then came Jena Urstedt against Prussia, Friedland against Russia, and Wagram against Austria. Through this relentless string of tactical masterclasses, he brought much of the European continent under direct French control or forced them into uneasy alliances. But this is exactly where the hubris really starts to show. Unable to defeat Britain across the English Channel, he tried to choke them out economically. He imposed the continental system, which was a massive trade blockade, but it completely backfired. It caused severe economic strain on his own allies and essentially forced him into a costly, draining guerrilla war in Spain and Portugal known as the Peninsular War. So while he was trying to starve Britain, his own military resources were bleeding out across the continent. Section 5. The Fall and Legacy. Those initial economic and military cracks, they completely shattered in 1812, bringing our historical Icarus crashing violently back down to earth. 600,000 troops. That is the size of the massive Grande Armée that Napoleon marched into the catastrophic invasion of Russia. And despite actually capturing a burning, abandoned Moscow, the campaign was a spectacular failure. Out of those 600,000 men, the vast majority perished. And they weren't just killed in battle. They were decimated by disease, sheer starvation, and the plunging sub-zero temperatures of the brutal Russian winter retreat. Soldiers literally froze to death in their sleep. It was a fatal, entirely self-inflicted blow to his empire. What followed was just an agonizing, step-by-step collapse. The Russian disaster in 1812 led directly to a massive defeat at Leipzig at the hands of the Sixth Coalition just a year later. By 1814, the Allies invaded France, forcing his abdication and his first exile to the Mediterranean island of Elba. But of course, his ambition wouldn't let him rest. He stages a desperate, daring return known as the 100 Days in 1815, raising an army only to suffer his final, decisive defeat at Waterloo. After that, there were no more second chances. He's permanently exiled to the remote, isolated South Atlantic island of St. Helena, where he died of stomach cancer at just 51 years old. While stuck on St. Helena, dictating his memoirs, Napoleon desperately tried to spin his own legacy. He really portrayed himself as a champion of the revolution and a visionary for European unity. And look, while he did leave an absolutely indelible mark on world history, transforming France from revolutionary chaos into a modern state, history remembers the immense devastation and the millions dead just as clearly as his undeniable brilliance. His story truly symbolizes ambition, genius, and hubris in equal measure. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to really grapple with. How do we properly weigh the enduring legacy of his modernizing legal codes and administrative brilliance against the millions of deaths caused by his relentless, unending ambition? Basically, how do we reconcile the genius of the administrator with the devastating hubris of the conqueror? It's a massive question historians still heavily debate today, and one I definitely encourage you to keep exploring. Thanks for joining me as we unpacked the monumental life of Napoleon Bonaparte.